Don't end up getting pinned under a heavy bench press at the gym. Watch this video instead to get super strong, keep yourself from getting injured, and make sure that you are a master bench presser. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Once again, it is Coach Judah from Enzolo Strength, and today we're gonna be covering everything to do with the bench press. I wanna cover everything from how to set up properly to how to perform the movement properly, as well as giving you guys some key tips on how to progress your bench press, whether that be exercise variations that you can throw in, as well as how I would train if I'm just starting to do the bench press and how I would progress to doing just the bar for the very first time. So this video is really gonna be for anybody that's a novice lifter all the way to an intermediate lifter, and we'll cover some equipment considerations and other considerations at the end of the video. This video can be your one-stop shop for everything bench press. I want you guys to be able to safely and effectively progress your bench press for years to come and hopefully stay injury-free. So without further ado, let's get bench pressing. To start off, I want to talk about the importance of the bench press because the bench press is a fundamental push-based movement that we can use to strengthen our body. And the bench press is the king of the push movements besides maybe the overhead press, which is a more vertical push movement. With the barbell, we're going to be able to overload that movement a lot heavier than we could with dumbbells or kettlebells or almost any other implement, and that's why it's so important to practice the bench press on a regular basis, as well as if you're going to compete in something like powerlifting and or strongman, it would be highly advised to implement a bench press into your programming. The muscles worked in the bench press, so the muscles that we're training are the chest, the shoulders, and the triceps, but it is a compound movement, meaning it's a full body movement, so the legs are still involved, the glutes are involved, the core is involved, and this is a piece I'll talk about a little bit later, but the back is definitely very involved in the bench press. So now that we understand the importance of the bench press, I want to talk about how to actually set up for a proper bench press. To set up for this, we're going to need either a freestanding bench press rack or we're going to need a squat rack that has J-hook attachments so that we can actually set up our bench press. The first thing we're going to want to know how to do is how to set the height for the J-hooks. And you might have to kind of plug and play with this in the beginning because we don't want it to be too low where we have to kind of do a half rep of bench press off the rack to get it off. We also don't want to have to protract our shoulders and roll forward to actually have to get the bar off the J-hooks. We want to be able to take it off with a nice smooth motion with as little distance as possible in taking the bar off the rack. So as a rule of thumb here, if I put my arms out straight, everyone's gonna have a different arm length, but I put my arms out straight here, you can see that this bar is just below my wrist. That's gonna be a good place to maybe start, but everyone's got a slightly different anatomy. So if you have shorter arms, the bar is gonna need to be closer down. If you have longer arms, it'll need to be farther away. Like I said, we don't wanna have too much space when we're bringing this bar up and off. We wanna go straight wrists, bring it up and off with as little movement as possible, right? And then put it back down. Another thing to keep in mind is that if you're not in a setup bench press station, you are gonna have to have a bench and you'll have to set up where the bench sits. So for us with the bench here, I want the head of the bench maybe just half a foot behind the bar, but it doesn't need to be too far behind the bar because I'm actually gonna be lining my eyes up with the bar. So as long as your head can rest comfortably on the bench with your eyes in line with the bar, that's gonna be an okay position for the bench to be in. So give yourself about a half a foot on the back of the bar and you should be okay. Also make sure the bench is right down the middle so it's nice and centered, and that way you don't feel off center when you bring the bar over your chest. All right, now that we have our height set, we have our bench set up, we can actually get into performing the bench press and the proper setup for a really big bench. So let's get into it. All right, so now we're finally under the bar, guys. The first thing we're gonna wanna do is make sure that the bar is in line with our eyes. So I don't wanna bring my head back behind the bar. I also don't wanna be way far forward where I'm gonna have to bring that bar really far ahead. I wanna basically bring it so that my eyes are right in line with the bar, and that's gonna be our initial head position, okay? And then from here, I wanna look at my foot positioning, okay? So foot positioning, I can either have them flat on the ground and wide out where I can still squeeze my glutes and push into the ground, or what I tend to do nowadays is I actually pull my toes back underneath me and I can still push into the ground and generate force there. I just find I get a little bit tighter and I like the ability to drive through my toes, but whatever you're comfortable with is best. The next piece here is gonna be grip, and this is gonna be, once again, personal preference. For most people in the beginning, I tend to have them take a grip that's similar to their push-up width, where they can take the tip of the thumb, line it up with the knurling, and then they can grab just outside of there. So it's almost like 3 fingers width on the outside of the bar, and then you know you have a nice equal grip on both sides. If you watch anybody do competition bench pressing, you'll see them go much, much wider. That's usually due to how tight their shoulders are as well as range of motion. But for most people just starting off, I'd say either between, thumb to here
or ring finger on the first knurling there is a good place to go. I wouldn't necessarily have a new bench presser go all the way out as wide as they can. That's more of a competition bench press. And this is generally gonna be more safe for the shoulders long term, going a little closer than going wider. So going here, finding our grip, make sure it's equal on both sides, and then we're going to basically have the bar angled and driving into the top of the ulna bone, right? So it's not just here, it's slightly angling the hand out, and then we can press up and out, right? So that's gonna be our grip. I'm gonna get into shoulder setting here in just a second, but that's how you kind of figure out what your grip is, and just play around with it till you find what feels most comfortable and best to you, because that's not gonna be the same for everybody.
All right, so we've set our feet, we've set our grip, we have the bar in line with our eyes. From here, I'm actually going to pull myself up slightly from the bar, and I'm going to roll my shoulders back and really feel my lats squeeze and engage. And I want to be sitting a little bit more onto my traps than I am on my back. So it's okay to have some arch in the low back here. You actually want to be in a little bit of a bridge position here. That's going to give us better overall positioning when it comes to keeping the lats engaged and also utilizing the pecs and the triceps a little bit better as well. So from here, I'm going to set my shoulders back. I want to feel big tension in the lats. So if I was, crushing a couple of small watermelons or something in my armpits, you want to feel that nice tension. And you want to have straight wrists to bring the bar up and over your chest. So I'm going to create some tension, straighten the wrists, bring that bar safely up and over the chest with control, and this is going to be my starting position for the actual bench press itself. So now we're ready to commence the bench press, but from here there's still a couple things I need to do. I need to breathe and brace, so big breath in, flexing the abdominals and glutes. I need to squeeze in on the bar, so I'm thinking about bending the bar in half and engaging my lats. Once again, if there was 2 small watermelons in my armpits, I'm crushing those in. And then I'm lowering the bar down with control to my sternum, so just below the nipple line, and then powering back up without allowing my shoulders to roll forward. So I do not want to protract or roll the shoulders forward. I want to keep my lats nice and engaged as I do this movement, and I want to keep the bar moving in a nice direction upwards. There will be a natural curve to the bar, so as I descend from above the shoulder joint down to the sternum, it'll go a little bit lower, and then as I drive back up towards the shoulders, it's going to hook up just slightly, which is called the J curve. That's totally normal. It doesn't need to move in a perfectly straight line, and that is going to be our bench press position. As I said previously, the width that you take on the bench press, your body positioning, all of these things can kind of change where the bar might lie on your chest, but in general, it should sit right on top of the sternum, the xiphoid process, which is the hard plate on your chest, just below the nipple line. That's kind of ideal point to shoot for in the beginning. Like I said, as we bring the bar down, there's going to be a natural curve because my arm is over my shoulder joint and I'm bringing it down to this position, so it's going to curve down. Then as I press, I'm going to go back up towards the shoulder joint to that stable position. So that's what we call the power curve or the J curve. It's not a perfectly straight line. It's basically down and back up to that position. So if you ever hear somebody talking about the J curve or the power curve, that's what they're talking about. The bench press is not a perfectly straight line. It's basically going down to the sternum and back up above the shoulder joint in a slight J motion. Let's throw a little bit of weight on the bench press now, just so I can show you guys the breathing and bracing again, and also how things can change a little bit with load, as well as I want to show you how to use the safeties to keep yourself safer when bench pressing by yourself. All right, so now that you guys have the basic technique for bench press down, it's time to start adding a little bit of weight. One thing to keep in mind is that if you are training alone, safety always comes first. So that's where something like these safety racks can come in really, really handy. These safeties are basically going to keep you from getting pinned to the bench by the bar, and then you can actually roll it back and get out from underneath it more easily, and it's going to be a lot safer than if you're doing things by yourself. I'm sure you guys have all seen those videos online of people getting pinned under massive loads and having to fight to get out from underneath the bar. That's not what we want. In a perfect world, maybe you have a spot or you ask somebody at your local gym to kind of help you out, especially if it's a weight you're not comfortable with. You could probably get away in the beginning without any safeties, just doing the bar or just doing lighter loads. But like I said, safety is always coming first. We don't want anybody to hurt themselves, to put themselves in a bad situation when it comes to the bench press. I'm gonna do a really quick set with some weight just to show you guys the whole setup all together, as well as I want you to watch the breathing, the bracing, and the creation of tension at the top before I actually go into the press, right? The setup for bench press is the most important piece. If you have a poor setup, you're not gonna have a big bench press. So the setup is key. If you get this right, you're gonna have a really big bench, things are gonna feel good, and you probably are gonna have a lot of longevity with it. If you don't get it right, you could be risking injury, as well as it's just not gonna be as strong as it could be. Hopefully that gives you guys a good visual of how the bench press should actually look from the setup to the actual performance. And you guys can see me actually taking a big breath in, creating tension through the lats, which are the big muscles on your back, and controlling the weight down, touching, and then driving up explosively. What I failed to mention earlier was that you also want to use a little bit of leg drive in that bench press, and you're gonna have to use more leg drive the heavier the bench press goes. The leg drive just means that we're pushing down and out during the actual press portion of the movement to generate more power through the floor. Because like I said in the beginning of the video, this is a compound movement. This isn't just a chest, shoulder, tricep movement. We're also using legs, glutes, and core to stabilize and drive the movement up and back. So what I want you to think about with the legs is pushing the toes or the feet into the ground, and not pushing directly down, but pushing down and out, right? We're pushing that way. You should actually feel yourself maybe even shift back on the bench a little bit, so we don't lift the butt off the bench, especially once again, if you're gonna be competing in something like powerlifting where you have to keep your butt on the bench, you don't wanna get red carded for that. So in terms of the actual leg drive, that is something that comes with time, and the heavier you go, the more you'll utilize that. But keeping in mind that you're gonna have a bigger bench if you can utilize your glutes and your legs in the press portion of the movement. Okay, awesome, so you're bench pressing now, and maybe you've been bench pressing for a while, so if you're an intermediate lifter and you feel like you're stuck on the bench press, I actually do have another video on 5 reasons that your bench press sucks, but I'm going to cover a few of those things again here. And if you're new to bench pressing and you feel like you can't even pick up the bar, I'm also gonna talk about how we can initially get into doing the bench press. So if you're brand new and you can't lift the 45-pound bar, I would highly recommend doing what's called a dumbbell floor press. A dumbbell floor press just means that we're grabbing 2 lighter dumbbells, we're lying on the floor, not a bench, so we're limiting our range of motion, and we're pushing those dumbbells away. This is going to allow us to build a lot of good shoulder, tricep, and chest strength, as well as stability prior to getting into the actual bench press. From there, we could progress into our dumbbell bench press. We could progress into a chest press machine if you have those at your gym. There's so many different ways that we could actually start to build strength for the bench press, but to get into the bench press, you actually have to be able to stabilize and push at least 45 pounds away from your body. Additionally, not creating a bit of an arch and a bridge with your back, which is going to limit the amount of lat tension you can actually create. And also it's going to send a little bit more of the load into the front of the shoulder rather than into the pectoral. And the last one is just to not go too hard too soon. Start with lighter loads, do higher volume, really get a ton of reps with the technique, make sure it feels good, and then start to load over time, right? Progressive overload. You wanna get a lot of reps in though with that technique so you can nail it down and nail it in, because if you don't have it at a lightweight, you're definitely not gonna have it at a heavyweight, and that's just gonna spell disaster for most people that are just starting out. If you guys made it this far in the video, thank you so much. We really appreciate it. If you wanna hit that subscribe button down below, we do release more strength training, nutrition, and lifestyle related videos all the time, at least twice a month, and we'd love to have you around, love to see you again. As well as if you enjoyed this video, click that like button and leave a comment if you found this useful or if you had any other questions that maybe we didn't answer. We try to be really thorough in this video, but you know, some questions always come up again, so please leave a comment. We would love to chat, and I do respond to every single comment. Okay, so looping back to what I said before, if you're an intermediate lifter, you're looking to advance your bench press, you're looking for those supplemental exercises or drills that you can do to get even better, even stronger, besides just doing the bench press, I'm gonna give you a few right now. Number one is going to be something like a block press or a mid-spoto press. Basically, this is where we're pausing with the bar a few inches off of our chest, generally in the point where we tend to struggle or we tend to stick. So if you're doing your bench press, you get to the bottom, you're pushing up and you start to slow down, that is the range or the zone where we want to focus our block or mid-spoto press at, so that we can start to get really strong isometrically in that position and blast through when we're actually doing our regular bench press. Secondly is going to be something like a long pause bench press, meaning that we're pausing on the chest for a very long time. We're holding it there for 2 or 3 seconds and then pushing up from the bottom. This can be a really great drill as well. We also have things like a wide grip bench press or a wide grip bench press with no feet. We're taking away the leg drive and we're focusing on a wider range of motion, usually at a lighter load, but this can help to round out your training as well as just give you a more well-rounded bench press. Regular dumbbell press can be great, neutral grip dumbbell press can be great, but the big ones that a lot of people miss are actually the lat exercises and the tricep exercises. A lot of times people think it's their chest that's lacking or their shoulders that are lacking, but it's really their lats that are not strong enough to hold that load, or it's their triceps that aren't strong enough to push through certain parts of the bench press. Some of my favorite lat exercises would be things like a heavy bent over row and or a reverse grip lat pull down or a regular lat pull down. Any pull-up variation really is also going to be awesome, especially if we're working on scapular control and a really controlled eccentric. Those are going to be fantastic lat exercises for the bench press, or even a dumbbell row, seal row. There's so many different options that you can do, but definitely have a good amount of rowing in your program, specifically targeting the lats, and work on isometric and eccentric strength of the lats as well, because when we're doing the bench press, we are locking the lats in and we're trying to hold them there as we descend into the bench press. And then for the triceps, I really like things like the JM press. I like doing a similarly, like from the floor, a paused tricep extension from the floor. I like doing a rolling dumbbell tricep extension or like a French press. There's so many different tricep extension exercises that you can do, but I really like the ones with the barbell. Even just doing an explosive rope extension and really focusing on the concentric squeeze at the bottom and a slow eccentric on the way up can be a fantastic exercise as well. But definitely don't skimp on doing additional tricep exercises. They're going to be really, really crucial if you want to get a really big bench press. So we know we've covered a lot, but I want to cover just a couple more things, so stick with me here. And now I'm going to talk about equipment considerations, because if you're going to do powerlifting or if you're going to progress yourself far into strength training, you're definitely going to be getting your hands on some sort of equipment at some point, whether it's a belt or elbow sleeves, wrist wraps, etc. I want to kind of explain what it does and why we want to use it, right? So let's start off with a conventional just weightlifting belt. This is a Inzer Forever lever belt, the 13mm one. This is going to be great for anybody that's bigger, that wants something really sturdy for heavier lifts. In the beginning, I usually recommend people get a 10mm because it's going to be a little more comfortable, a little easier to break in, and it really depends how far you're wanting to go with your strength training, but this is going to help with the breathe and the brace. It gives you that external cue and that external stability to really get super tight and feel more stable and safe when you're doing a heavy lift, whether that's a deadlift, a bench press, or a squat, or an overhead press. The belt can be a really, really big assistance. What I recommend for the belt though is don't throw it on until you feel like you need it, right? Don't throw this on until things get really, really heavy. You feel like you're lacking stability and you need a little bit of extra assistance. That's where the belt can come in handy. Secondly here is lifters, and this is only if you're planning to do a foot flat on the ground approach to bench press. When I was competing in powerlifting, I wore lifters for the bench press, and that's because they require you to have your feet flat on the ground. This gave me a little bit of a heel, a little bit of leverage. It depends what federation you're competing in, but now they actually either allow you to do toes on the ground, or you might need to wear lifters if you have to have your feet flat on the ground. So that's just something to consider. And also, if you find it more comfortable to put your feet flat on the ground, this can give you a little bit of an extra edge that can feel really, really good when you're actually pressing, right? It can help you to push harder into the ground. It can help with leg drive. So it depends what technique you use, feet flat on the ground or toes underneath. But once again, this is just something to consider if you are looking to get equipment to help with your bench press. So next is gonna be wrist wraps. These are the gangster wraps from Mark Bell. Basically what these do is they create more stability around the wrist and they lock your wrist in place, right? As the weight gets heavier, your wrist has to balance a lot more load, and this can give you that extra stability and that extra safety and that feeling of safety when you're coming to bring that bar up and over with a really, really heavy weight, right? Once again, with the wrist wraps, you probably don't need them in the very beginning. You wanna get your wrist stronger, you wanna work on, having really, really good technique. But as you get heavier and heavier, these can be absolute game changer when it comes to pushing heavier loads and just having your wrists feel good and feel stable with a heavy weight. And the very last one is going to be elbow sleeves. These are actually something that I just started using recently, more for my overhead press. But what these really do is they keep your elbow joint warm, especially if you have a previous history of elbow issues, like golfer's elbow or tendonitis or something like that. These can be really, really useful in keeping your elbow warm and giving you a little more stability around the elbow joint. It can feel really, really nice for a lot of people. But once again, this is something where you probably don't need it in the very beginning, but if you do have a history of injury or it doesn't feel good, these can help a lot, and they can actually help you to feel better when you're pushing heavier weight. And finally, this can be really useful for all strength training, is a mouth guard. This is just the 6DS from New Age. This just gives you something to bite down on and it can really help you to create a little more force, as well as it can protect your teeth when you're doing heavier strength training. So whether that's a deadlift, a squat, bench press, mouth guard is a good thing to have, and it will protect your teeth in the long term as well. Those are gonna be kind of my top 5 pieces of equipment to help with the bench press. You definitely do not need the equipment if you're just a general gym goer or even just wanting to get strong. It's not required. They are more of an assistance tool, and some of those things are super useful if you're gonna compete in strength sports. So definitely, if you have any questions about that stuff, leave them down in the comments below. And I think we covered basically everything about the bench press today, from the setup to the performance to different exercise variations to get you guys stronger. If you have any questions on kind of the training and progression, I would go check out my other video on bench press called 5 Reasons Why Your Bench Press Sucks. I do kind of break down a little bit more of like the programming and kind of ways that you could progress it. If you have any more questions, leave them down in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Make sure to subscribe because we have more videos coming soon. Like the video, and as per usual, this is Coach Judah from Zolo Strength. Peace.